Every civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. But I can only make so many.
We've decided to do something reckless. We went and saw, not separately, the new Blade Runner film, and we've done no preparation whatsoever, and we're going to talk about it briefly. So be prepared for some poor quality insights.
This is the kind of thing that would normally qualify as bonus material.
Yes. Or possibly literally unbroadcastable, but we'll see. You are listening to a imprint, a subset of About Buildings and Cities.
Yeah, this might be like episode 24 and a half or something. It might not have
24A, yeah.
And so we're talking about the Blade Runner 2049, Denis Villeneuve's updating of the original, which was our last released episode, although we actually recorded it quite a long time ago.
Yeah, in the summer.
And I think let's just talk about whatever we feel like, and then
stop talking. I also have a cold, so you can hear certain huskiness in my voice. But
one of the things which you notice immediately with the film, from the first thing that happens, is that it's making allusions, or it's doing kind of versions of scenes which exist in the original.
Oh, here's a good point. This is probably, strictly speaking, for people who either don't care or have seen the film, because we're going to spoil it completely. Or rather, we're not going to make any real attempt not to. I mean, that's kind of obvious from our style, but I feel, given the state of contemporary discourse, it's necessary to have that sort of note on the front. So let's spoil the first 6 seconds of the film.
So the film opens with like a conscious kind of retread, or kind of subversive retread of the hell opening in the first film, but in place of the flyover of all the oil derricks and the blackness and the smoke, instead we see like solar farms and then acres and acres of polytunnels.
Yeah, huge solar farms, but they're the cool ones, the like parabolic mirror ones.
And I thought that this, like, the film has, certainly in my view, like a bit too much of this kind of thing. But this was one of the more successful things, because it is this kind of like subversion or transformation of an original scene.
Yeah, and it kind of takes the role of like, in Star Wars, you've got the big yellow words going up the screen. Yes. It's kind of doing that job. Yeah, I mean, they actually have some words at the beginning of both films, but it also sets the tone.
Yeah, they have like a sort of 500-word essay which comes up on screen at the start of the film, which is fine. It's fine, I guess. The longer it went on, there were like slight ripples of laughter going around the auditorium that I was in.
Was there a really long... I don't think I got a very long one. Perhaps I did what I do with anything over about 25 words, which is not read it. Yeah. What did it say?
It explains everything that's happened. It explains about the new Tyrell Corporation is, that's called something else, and about they've made a revolution in farming, and then they banned all the replicants, and then they let the replicants come back again because these replicants can't rebel, and something else. And by the way, there are still Blade Runners.
Yeah, sure. Actually, if they'd had the courage of their convictions, just flying over the solar farms in the polluted air of their industrial forebears of 30 years before would say it. Yeah. Because there's a lot of stuff where they kind of this is going to be an ongoing theme. They kind of overdo and underdo things. But the thing, yeah, you see the whole story's there. They've dealt with it, and the world's still rubbish.
So how do you want to approach this? Shall we kind of go through the film and talk about it, or do you want to just pick out something which you liked about it?
Can we talk about all the things that are good about it? Like, I think we should go through all the good stuff, because actually...
I mean, my favourite thing is some of the design of some of the places, especially the new places in the film. So I really liked... I like this, like, polytunnel... kind of savannah which has grown up, and I really liked that as a location, which is where Ryan Gosling's Blade Runner goes to bump off some grisly old escaped replicant. And I really liked many of the kind of newer settings. And later on in the film, you go to this amazing radiation-scarred Las Vegas, which is all kind of filled with dust, and it's all lit in this amazing orange light. And I thought those were really great. And those, there are times in the film where you think we've gone into like 4K and has anything actually got any better? But those were moments where you were like, yeah, this looks amazing. This is really a spectacle.
Yeah, and they the whole design of lots of it was brilliant. I'm trying to kind of unpicture myself why. Like, there's some obvious things that some of the places they go are really cool. Some are mediocre as well.
I thought the big rubbish,
the rubbish heap.
The rubbish heap is a bit.
That whole thing belonged in a different film, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to totally mix up the good and the bad here, but my big critique about the design of the places is that it didn't feel like a world. It felt that there were lots and lots of different ideas, some of which were very strong, some of which were weak, but that critically they did not form a whole. That the kind of rubbish heap cannot really belong to the same world as many of the other places that we're in. And there's this kind of curious thing, like, as you go through, there are things in the film, the first time you go to Ryan Gosling, his character is basically the same as Deckard in the original film. He's got his lonely little apartment, and there's a scene at the beginning where he's walking up the stairs through a scene which is seems like a very literal quotation from Soylent Green, where in the same way Charlton Heston walks up the stairs to his apartment, and you have to tread the whole stairwell is crowded because there's nowhere else to go. Everyone is lying down in the stairwell, and he kind of walks all the way up through. And then you have various other scenes in the apartment, and all those people seem to have disappeared. They obviously found somewhere else to go at some point.
Yeah. So a big and really obvious thing about this film, we're completely subverting the even tiny attempt we had to have any structure, is that it's all made of collage. It's like he didn't know what to do, and so he made what actually I think is a very successful decision given he didn't know what to do, which is to make the whole film out of cobbled together bits of other things. And that just automatically brings in so much stuff with it, because you get all the stuff from those different situations. There's loads culled and sort of reinterpreted from the first film. There's things culled from all over science fiction, right from its early days to the present day. There's some pretty. We could just reel off a list of films. There's bits culled from sort of literature, all in a fairly superficial way, I think, which does give it, like, if you haven't got. You've got those sort of two approaches to cooking, right? You can have the few beautiful ingredients, or you can kind of do French haute cuisine cooking, where you put everything in the world in and sort of stew it down for a long time and then stuff it inside something else. And both of them make very interesting meals. But you have kind of different critical approach to them, and it does work in that way, that there's masses of stuff going on. All these conversations are sort of started, and at times it's quite deftly handled, actually. I think at times that early transition between the sort of two notions of the Blade Runner, there's lots of the echoes of the first Blade Runner sometimes work pretty well.
In terms of the places, I felt that where there are these echoes of the original, the bigger a spin they've put on it, the more they've interpreted it, the more they've subverted it. Generally, I thought the more successful it was. So, yeah, the new polytunnel hell. I thought that the sort of kind of new version of the Tyrell Corporation headquarters, with whatever his name is, played by Jared Leto, which is quite a different. It's quite a different set of spaces. They seem to draw. They look to me like they've been looking at Moebius's comic book, The Incal, which is this it's like classic French 70s comic, which I'm sure. I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they have been. And I thought that was quite good. I thought that the ones where they quote very literally scenes from the original, there's a street scene which is literally just a version of the street scene from the original, but done a little bit less well, and also in a way that kind of begs the question of why things haven't changed more. That you literally have that sort of blimp advertising the off-world colonies, and it's the same blimp, and it comes over again. They've even got the same recorded message playing, but we're meant to be 30 years into the future.
Well, it's a slightly different recorded message with a slightly different, and the blimp is slightly cleaner.
Same thing. There's also these weird things, these weird continuities which you forget are in the original at all, like the fact that apparently the Soviet Union still exists in Blade Runner alternative history.
Sure, yeah.
Which I don't remember being a thing in the original
advertising
film at
for
all.
like Pan Am and stuff in a world where everyone's got rocket cars. Yeah, I didn't even notice the Soviet Union. I didn't really. I think we might differ over the new Tyrrell Corporation. It's a different corporation, but who cares? Headquarters. I actually found those pretty unconvincing. I think it's because, for me, they reminded me far too much of like AutoCAD rendering sample that comes up on the sort of flash, as you're loading it up. There's a strong vibe of like Ripley light, sort of naff but very expensive interior render decoration.
Everything's marble. There are no details because they're too annoying to
draw.
Everything's monolithic.
I mean, and also I think that sort of like really blank temple-y sort of all these acolytes wandering around in robes. I mean, they sort of stripped it right back from that, but that's what the place is, and it's entirely void of humans except for the occasional custodian. The things that I liked, a lot of the things that I liked are things which aren't really easy to discuss because it has a great atmosphere at times, and it was very exciting to watch. There's some great scenes, some of which I think are not really in the kind of Blade Runner-y mould. There's a great thing where a car is being swept out to sea while stuff is going on, which is quite pleasingly dynamic. Lovely, like really good production values. Amazing rain and snow and stuff. Like really, really splashy water and rainy rain. And
that kind of stuff looks pretty amazing.
And that sounds something kind of glib, but actually that kind of is amazing because it can summon up elemental forces into a film in a really good way.
Yeah, so the sort of sandstorminess, the snow. For me, so there was a period in the film where I thought, actually, I'm really, really into this, and it's there's a period in the Ryan Gosling character arc where he keeps discovering. He starts to have this kind of paranoia about the external world. Why I like it, so he discovers a date on the root of a tree, which I think is his inset date or something. He's got no idea how it could be there. And then he discovers, he knows that his memories are fake, but then he actually discovers this toy horse, which means that his memory is real in some way. Yeah. And this kind of, it's this paranoia where the external world starts to kind of conspire against you. And what I particularly liked about that is that seemed to capture something about the fiction of Philip K. Dick, which the whole Blade Runner kind of now franchise sort of stretches back to, that very distinct sort of the world is collapsing in on me.
The world is very capricious and uncertain. Yeah, I had bits in the film where I really liked it, and I also had bits where I was really bored.
That stuff, unfortunately, is not... the way it works out is very unsatisfying. But there was a moment when I thought, this is really, really great.
That's it. There's loads of like great sort of initiations of things. Oh, another thing I like, there's some sort of inherently funny things as well. The best joke is that Ryan Gosling is playing a Tin Man in search of a soul.
Yeah, his character is not really in any way distinguishable from his character in like Drive or any of these other ones.
There's a reason for that, isn't it?
Which means
but there are bits when he has to like try and pretend to have a personality or something.
Yeah,
and it doesn't work at all. But there's a reading where that's fine because he's actually a cyborg.
Yeah.
And he sort of knows what the expectation of having a personality is, but can't do it.
Yeah, that's the problem is that you never doubt that he's a cyborg.
No.
He can never make you doubt your initial assessment.
No, but you can make him, you can sort of, you can believe that he's thinking that he might not be one. But you have to make that work, you have to kind of go along with this notion that he understands what's expected of him and always does that. And so he's, in understanding what's expected of him, he knows that you're meant to, when you think you're a person, have an emotional response. And so he sort of synthesizes it. Yeah. Everything is insincere. And that's sort of funny. There's various moments where that's funny. going through. There's a bit when his boss tells him, "You've done quite well so far, without any soul." And he's been worrying about this.
Some of there's some really bad dialogue.
Oh, no, all the dialogue is bad. There's no good dialogue. Is there any good dialogue in the film?
I really struggle to remember any. The dialogue is verging on kind of anime. Actually, it's got that kind of dubbed anime, like hysterical woodenness of anime, which is not great. Not great. If you've thrown that much money at something, can't you get someone to write?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. The only memorable the lines I'm remembering, are quotes from things. They quote Treasure Island and say that, and they quote Vladimir Nabokov and don't point it out.
I like the quote of Treasure Island because it's not the natural kind of pretentious reference you reach for, is it, Robert Louis Stevenson?
Well, if you wanted it to be pretentious, I can see a way in which it really works, because it's like the situation, it works on a number of levels, although I'm not sure how intentional all of this is, because he's talking, is Tom Gunn the name of the character?
Ben Gunn, who's with his lust for cheese.
With his mad lust for cheese. Now, and you're going out to the outside world, but Ben Gunn is a satire on Robinson Crusoe, so it's got this like reciprocal sort of going back in generations, and it's the abandoned man who kind of takes a man in to make a kind of image of himself and the whole thing. But I'm not sure any of that's actually there. I think it's just a fun of, which is kind of fine. I mean, it's a great book, and people have read it, I presume, and everyone's heard of it. I mean, it's good. If you're wondering what to do for story time for the kids, mind you, if you've got time to listen to these incredibly long and not that exciting podcasts, you probably don't have huge numbers of children.
Before we kind of move on from placeness, I think that there is something strange which has happened, which is that it's moved from being a story about the future into a story being about alternative history, because of having to keep on these qualities of the original. Those things have become anachronisms, and then they've become like a parallel universe. So one example of this is that the original is written out of like the moment of Japanese technological supremacy. So everything's Japanese, much in the same way as in Neuromancer. And that's maintained in this version, where there are these sort of strange machines which for some reason Ryan Gosling has to talk to in... Well, no, he doesn't talk to it in Japanese, but it talks to him in Japanese.
Yeah, and there's Japanese writing everywhere, but no, like the kind of Asian cast has largely gone. There were lots of like Asian kind of back characters, and it's become sort of multicultural now.
Not very.
Yeah, not very. Oh no, I mean the key actors, in fact, essentially in both films are entirely white Americans, but the incidental bit parts are now different, but nonetheless sort of exotic back, which I think is, again, suburbia has gone, but the characters are kind of, actually, I think something that there were middle class characters, sort of, or like it felt like there was more of a middle class in this one than the first one. Like the police chief inspector feels like a pretty middle class.
Yeah, although I could never work out what kind of life is she. Where does she live? Like, where do people like that live in the city? Where is their place?
Yeah, but it didn't feel so that. It may just be, I think this is probably just unintentional, but it could be that, the environment is being brought a little bit back, and, with our new Weevil Solient, we're all going to be happily living, and perhaps, a bit of normal life is recovering, because the first one really had this thing where, the American dream has completely gone.
Yeah.
It's gone, it's literally got up and left Earth. And for all the advertising for and discussion of Off-World, it didn't seem anything like as close in the second film, where it does seem that there are people and there's a few people doing normal things. And part of that actually is also that some of the situations that you see are so sort of ridiculous and don't fit in that you disregard them. There's a ridiculous sort of kind of Dickensian, sort of Psycho-Dickensian orphanage.
That I thought, which
just belonged in a completely different sort of film, and also was like flippant.
I have heard the complaint made that there are no black characters in the film until you meet one who is essentially a slave owner.
Yes, yes. There's a guy. There's after him. That's true. Until that point, there's another one after him who is like a sort of dodgy used car salesman type.
Yeah. Not great.
Who is and there is a little bit of like animal ownership, which is kind of cribbed from Philip K. Dick, but they don't really do anything with that either. It's just a lot of these things are you take a literary reference, and it comes laden with all these interesting possibilities that the creators of whatever the references have opened up, and then sometimes they're brought through, but generally it's just left there.
Yeah, there's a general. I guess what I find slightly dismaying about it is that there is the kind of possibilities of world building seem to have closed in. People seem, if you compare the first and the second film, there seems to be so much less confidence about what you can make and what you can create, and everyone seems so much more hung up on trying to cohere with, and that's partly about being a sequel. It is partly about being a sequel, but I think that it is more than that, that there does seem to have been a kind of closing in of the possibility of invention. There's all sorts of mad stuff in the first one, like that great bar that he goes through briefly with all of these women in feather boas smoking enormous pipes for...
Yeah, it's great. But it feels fine. It feels like sort of this ridiculous kind of. We're all dancing around the plague pit in this kind of ridiculous, decaying world. And also the second one doesn't have any good close scenes. Like the close spaces aren't exciting. There are great moments of sort of enormous CGI spectacle, which are done very, very well and are normally pretty unconvincing. And I think that's a sort of skill base they really possess. But there aren't many of the really evocative...
Yeah, like Deckard's apartment in the first one, there are quite claustrophobic bits in there. Or, in the street scene in the first one, especially when Leon is trying to kill Deckard, being sort of crushed between cars and dodging around things.
And there are like kids playing around and stuff, and which is great if you can... There's all sorts of other bits of incidental life going on. Here, very often, everything is cleared away.
Yeah.
And there'll be a couple of characters and nobody else in most of the good scenes. It will just be very open space, very few moving parts. Both are very theatrical.
Yeah.
But in different ways, I think.
The things which I think are left to remain to discuss are the two big female characters in the film. I don't know how much you want to talk about the augmented reality girlfriend, who I think is most people's least favourite thing about the film. It struck me as being an idea which, as first proposed, must have seemed like kind of fun and transgressive. It's like, here's the guy, he's actually a replicant, he's a real robot guy, and he's also like, he's like a 4chan guy, he's got a waifu, he's got a cartoon character that he's in love with, there's this potential for it to be really silly and also rather abject. And then in the process of creating it, actually, they've had to give her lots and lots of agency and and her own kind of character. And in a way, they've tried to make her less of a problem from that point of view. But in the process, actually, maybe it's a bit more of a problem in some ways, that the kind of small steps that she's taken towards being a person also make her seem like more of a weird male fantasy.
Yes. It's not like normally you would think that when in the process of writing something, you'd start with one sort of character and move, but literally it kind of morphs through about three things during the film.
Yeah.
So it's the sort of an idea very clearly cribbed from Her, a film of a few years back, that he's got his sort of virtual assistant girlfriend, who is meant to be such, sold as such. And at first presentation, she's this sort of servile, like very obviously synthetic a sort of collection of archetypes, sort of 50s wifey, and then very quickly develops into sort of supposedly meaningful companion with slight servile edge.
And then becomes kind of martyred.
But it all feels strangely weightless. I think the strongest way to have gone with perhaps better writing would be to have her just be the servile fantasy at the beginning. Because the whole thing, like, it seems grubby, even grubby and sad the way it is, but it would be grubbier and sadder if he literally rejected the world for this crap servile fantasy that is absolutely... Because one thing there is this sort of... One of the big potential writing openings which isn't taken is that he ultimately plumps for the kind of crap stuff. Yeah. Not for real life. He actually is a cyborg, and he ultimately returns to his root of this sort of crap, like unfree, this kind of anti sort of rugged individualism fantasy would be quite interesting.
He threatens to transcend himself, and then he doesn't.
Yeah, but he never threatens very sincerely, and that, like, but it would be a better twist of the knife if he really went for this sort of absolutely, he's got no ability to be unsatisfied with something which is completely synthetic and servile and doesn't offer any sort of opening excitement.
It is a problem. It's a problem because she kind of represents his, like, he might become human because he's got all of these feelings for this virtual reality woman. It's very weird. The role that it's playing in the plot is very strange. I think that another missed opportunity is the other big female character, the cyborg assassin of the... Well, I can't remember her name. I can't remember the name of the company, but
it's called like Wandle Corporation or something. It's not quite that, but it's like... And it's definitely like Wandle the Wizard that runs it, and it's
What I really like about her is that she has a bit of the quality of the cyborgs in the first of the replicants in the first one, in that she is scary, she's really dangerous, proud, and she also has there's something kind of mysterious about what's going on in her head. She kills people and then like the tear rolls down her cheek as it's happening. And, that's what one of the things, thinking back on it, that really works in the first one is that you have the cyborgs, the team, they've killed all these people, they're really dangerous, but you sympathise with them because they're running for their lives. So you're sort of conflicted in how you relate to Roy Batty and the team in the first film.
They're kind of romantics. Yeah. They're dangerous, romantic, like, figures, aren't they? Yeah. Desperate, doomed, impassioned, sometimes sort of sentimental.
Yeah, there's no one really like that in the...
One of the things, there's several things that that this film lacks that the first one had, one of which is interesting characters. Very, very. I mean, she's probably the most interesting character, but it's not. Really, it doesn't really work. It kind of alludes to various directions, and then, yes, at the beginning, she's sort of like when people are killed, she cries but goes along with it, and there's a sort of strange ambiguity about where her agency is. She has no agency, but she also has. She just does whatever the plot sort of entails. Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it? In this one, they can't rebel.
Except they can, when it's needed. Doesn't work.
But it needs to be brought out in some other way. You need to find...
It's not 1984.
They should have a kind of a kill switch or something. They should have something. There would be ways of doing it.
Or be like in 1984, where, you've got all these different models of people who are like caged in intellectually, caged in their heads.
Do you want to add anything else? Because I think we might bring it to a...
Oh, there were a few more. There's more things that I think are interesting. There's Harrison Ford character, who is another sort of opening where it alludes potentially again to his sort of failings in age, but then backs away from that, which leans a bit on one of the great themes of the first film, which is to do with mortality. We're all going to die. how bright and fast is the candle going to burn. I have burnt very fast indeed. Well, and it just sort of backs away from that, and he becomes an absolutely chip off the old block Harrison Ford character. In a way, the trouble with our analysis is that we'll inevitably talk about the sort of talky bits, the nature of character and dialogue, and those are the weakest bits. Yeah. So bits in the film, I enjoyed watching the film. I thought it was good, which is not something you necessarily get from our conversation. I thought it was probably one of the best science fiction films to come out in the last 10 years or something like that, I would say. But there are all these problems with it, but the problems are sort of locused in the writing and the plot and the characters, whereas the environments are great.
Yeah. Music's terrible.
Well, not great.
If you didn't notice it, it's all right. But it's all this like Hans Zimmer, like.
There's no way you could not notice it. It's so like often it's the only thing going on. It will be like a guy driving a car with like. I
wish he could just not do that.
I mean, it's all the same stuff, isn't it? Like, there's there's a bit when he's talking about when like they sneak in this quote of pale fire, and which in a way is another piece made of several components, some pathetic, some sort of ridiculous. But there's nothing. It doesn't do anything with it at all. It's got nothing. It's just like an Easter egg rather than it's like we've slipped something in for people to notice or more likely read about on the internet. Better than I thought it'd be. Yeah. Much better than I thought it'd be. I thought it would be quite bad.
Yeah, it didn't look good in the trailer, but it was better than that.
Yeah.
Do you want to do marks out of 10?
What's the scale? You need give me one thing with a mark out of 10.
Marks out of 10. Original one 9.
Original. I think it's a really unfair comparison to make it against the original one, because the original one is just much better. It's got so much more interesting stuff going on.
It's good. It's good.
It's
a good film.
I'd say it's a 5-star film. Which is immeasurably worse than the original.
Good. Pithy. Right. Okay.
And actually, it's a film which is quite good when you're watching it, and less good afterwards. And I'd say Blade Runner, if you think about it, is sort of the opposite. It's got some bits of like real, like the longer time goes on, the less you think about the really stupid bits in the original Blade Runner, of which there are quite a few, and some of which are very stupid indeed. This one, you sort of think more and more about the weaknesses of it, whereas in the moment, I really quite enjoyed watching it, and it's got some great action. And it's got, one of the problems is that it's kind of 40% standard Hollywood action film smashed into a rich soup of references.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, the Tyrell character was really bad in this one. Absolutely crap. Absolutely crap.
Sherry.
I think the writing was pretty sad. I think it would have been... I don't think he did a very good job, and I think the writing would have floored anyone. It was rubbish.
Yeah. I don't think anyone is doing that one particularly well.
It was rubbish. All right.
Well, thanks very much for that. Well, I think this is probably going to go out as a double release with another episode, which we've also got ready. Thanks for sticking with us. We've noticed quite a few new subscribers, so hello to all of you.
Yeah.
There
are there's a long pipeline of episodes. It's just that
it takes a while to get
a long time.
Get through it all, but
we both have jobs.
Yeah, but I think we're going to become a bit more regular, certainly for
a little bit. It's perhaps we're becoming slightly more seasonal, or more sporadic. Perhaps becoming slightly more sporadic.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. And we've got some big. We're going to launch a big new season of episodes where we are...
It's going to be the big one, another big architecture one.
We're getting back into architecture in a big way. What else? Well, remember, you can all follow us on all
all that sort of stuff.
Twitter and all that kind of things. Everything, it's all in the show notes. Have a look, and thanks very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.